I apologize for us being 10 minutes late tonight, but we do want to welcome you to the Wednesday, August 30th, 2017 business meeting of the Richmond Community Schools Board of School Trustees. Please stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before we begin tonight, I would like to say at this time, I would like to ask all of us to keep the Gulf region in your thoughts and prayers. They will need the nation's help, including ours, to help restore and rebuild. The schools and the school's children's lives have been disrupted in a devastating way. So we could do that. Our mission statement.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
Thank you, Fred. And Division.
Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for a life of choice, purpose, and service.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. And now, celebrations and reflections by the board and superintendent.
Tonight I'd like to ask Mrs. Hazel Baker if she would come to the podium, and she's going to give us a brief report on our community partnerships. Ms. Hazel Baker?
The cameras come out. Good evening, everyone. Community partnerships have been always near and dear to many of our hearts, and especially nowadays that the way our cities has had some challenges recently. So just looking at, I sent a PowerPoint earlier to the board, just Richmond Community Schools, our community partners can be any organization in the community that is concerned with the education of Richmond's children. That can be church partners, business partners, any nonprofit organization too that helps us out here in Richmond. Our local government, our mayor has recently stepped up to the plate to help us with just a local project that we're doing right now. Is the homecoming parade, has been helping us with that. He's also been a guest speaker in some of our events. Some of our county council and city council members have also stepped up to help mentor some of our students in our programs. Nonprofit agencies such as the Boys and Girls Club, Communities in Schools, and Girls Inc. are also some of those after-school programs that are helping us. Boys and Girls Club is almost at its fill of students right now. We have students on a waiting list at Boys and Girls Club, so those organizations are also needing additional help and services. The local businesses, the We Are Savers, for some of those businesses that are helping us, have been a great asset. Mr. Terrell has been doing squares with the super, and he'll be doing that again this year. Kids are looking forward to that. And then, of course, Hill's Pet Nutrition has that beautiful courtyard inside Vail, and they've helped out with field trips, bed in a bag, you name it. Just several different organizations and businesses that are helping our children and our staff. Civic organizations such as United Way, the More Than Words has been a very powerful impact for our students. And then upcoming Lemonade Day will be coming up also. That'll be kind of fun venture for many of our students. Out of our, I had 77, but out of our 78 partnerships that we have, all of our stakeholders are interested in improving the academic achievement and social outcomes for Richmond students. And then we have a list at the end that I sent you of all of those community partners. And these are just a handful. I mean, I know I printed all these out for you, but Civic Hall has community partners. Richmond Art Museum, I mean, you name it, all of our different schools have different partners. So this is a list that we have that gives us, that have helped many of our student organizations. And if I've left someone off, I apologize, and give me a call at 973-3300. And I'll make sure we get that. She's doing live, so just a shameless plug. And if anybody wants to be a partner for us, for our schools, to help our students and our staff and our community, to let me know, and we'll make sure we get you connected to the right people. Does anyone have any questions this evening? Excellent. All right. Have a great evening.
Hey, I just want to say, Bridget, and to all of our partners that are out there, I don't know sometimes if they realize the value that they have in Richmond Community Schools, enhancing curriculum when they come in and work in the classrooms, and the many, many other things they do for our students. We're very fortunate in this community to have that kind of help and that kind of support from
I
our
agree
community.
completely. All right, thank you.
Okay, it's time for public commentary. No one signed up? Okay, we're ready for consent items.
Our consent items this evening are 5.01, our approval of minutes, 5.02, human resources, including the addendum at your desk tonight, 5.03, accounts payable, and 5.04, our monthly financial report.
Okay, do I hear a motion that we approve of consent items?
I make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any comments or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now we're ready for action items.
All right, action items this evening. Our first action item, 6.01, donations. I'm going to ask Mrs. Scalf if she would speak to this, please.
Good evening. Tonight, we ask the board for approval of the following donations. We had $250 in donations for Teacher Appreciation Week at Community Youth Services. We had $2,600 donated to various teams in the athletic department at the high school. We had $200 valued diabetic testing and monitoring supplies at Test Intermediate. We also received $6,561 in donated items and sponsorships for our e-learning expo this summer. So today I ask the board to approve $9,611 in donations.
Do I hear a motion that we approve the donations?
I move to approve the donations.
Okay, Aaron makes a motion. Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Jeff seconds it. Any comments or questions? Just once again, a huge thank you to our community for their generous support, and it is generous. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, our next action item this evening is 6.02, permission to advertise the budget. Mrs. Scalf?
Tonight, we come to you with the 2018 budget. We also come with the 2018 through 2029 bus replacement plan and the 2018 through 2020 capital projects plan. Tonight, I ask permission to advertise Forms 1, 2, and 3 on the Gateway at the Department of Local Government Finance website at in.gov. These are budget forms required by State Board of Accounts and the Department of Local Government Finance. We are required to post Form 3 in the Department of Local Government Finance Gateway only as approved by the Board of School Trustees. Posting Form 3 also notifies taxpayers of the public hearing on the 2018 budgets, which will be held this year, September 13th, 2017 at 5:30 p.m. at the Administration Building in the boardroom. We will have an adoption date of September 27th, 2017. The 2018 budgets are not being approved by this motion, but the administration will be authorized to advertise rates and levies for the 2018 budgets in the taxing funds. The tax levies, as shown on Form 3 to be advertised, will not be the final levies, which are typically lower. The higher levies are advertised so that the budget process can take into account unknown and uncontrollable occurrences and still provide Richmond Community Schools with all the revenue to which it is legally entitled. It's my recommendation that tonight the board approve the request to post the 2018 budgets as expressed in Form 3 presented to you on board docs.
Do I hear a motion that we accept permission to advertise the budget?
So moved.
Aaron makes the motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Brad seconds it. Any comments or questions?
I would,
Jeff?
This proposal, and I understand that if I'm correct,
we have the short timeline, so we have to advertise it by the 13th of September, correct?
Correct.
I think there's a couple of things that's worthy for us. I've been reading over this and been thinking about this for, well, essentially since I found out about it Friday, but I didn't read it until after that. But evidently there was a meeting with the executive committee to kind of get a direction on the executive committee of the board to kind of get a direction on where to go and how to deal with the bus replacement. And we've known for a couple years that we were going to run into problems with bus replacement because we had passed up buying buses in the past. And, this year, as in our notes, we were supposed to buy, replace 9. We got 7 next year. And then in 2022, we got 10. As I think about this, part of the process here is that we're electing to go forward and use rainy day money, $600,000, to buy our buses. I'm making the assumption that this is a one-time spend, and we're not planning on refunding the rainy day fund.
No, it would be a one-time spend at this point.
Right.
That's what's been proposed.
So, and I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other, but, this is really kind of a thing that I was kind of interested in, seeing what kind of discussions or thoughts, if any, that us as board members had on it. And I think a lot of it goes to cash balance. A lot of it goes to how are we going to correct the problem in the next 3 or 4 years. So I was kind of hoping that we would have a deeper discussion on what we were going to do with the bus replacement. But as I was looking at the totals in the rainy day fund, I think the total that we're supposed to have is like 4.3 million. Is that the number? Mm-hmm. And I was looking at, let me find it here. Yeah, 4.3. And one of the questions that I had and was, do we have any other debt or payments that we have approved other than the $929,000 for the technology or for the books? Do we have any other debts or payments that we have allocated any rainy day money for that's out there?
The only other appropriation we have in rainy day is $154,000 that's set aside for Microsoft Office 365. Should that be necessary at present, we are receiving a free product. However, Mr. Titterow originally was concerned that may not be enough of the product that we need. So we have, with the one-to-one initiative at Power Up, we appropriated those funds and we have left those there in the event that we need that.
Okay. What? Okay, good. So I thought we had actually some more appropriated out of it than that. Part of the thing that concerns me is we've had, and this goes to the allocation of the rainy day fund. I'm not so sure that maybe we should not have used some of the transportation or some of the other capital, or some of those other funds, because I guess I'm kind of looking at the point, we're getting ready to the point of entering into negotiations. We talk about one-time money coming out of rainy day fund, and that's not part of the negotiations. So we take a look at that. We're pulling 900 plus out for textbooks. We'll pull 600 out for rainy day. We've kind of bounced around what we call, cash balance numbers kind of bounced around. We've heard 8%, we've heard 11%. By pulling out this 600,000, we're right at that limit. So we have no more, we're gonna go below our safety net if something happens. We talked about what we're gonna do with our staff because, the raises in the past being tight. We've had some good staff leave because of salary. I'm not proposing anything, but as I take a look at everything that I'm just afraid that we're going to strap ourselves with the rainy day, because to me it should be more of an emergency. I know I'm old school. When I first got on the board, and I can remember David Stidham sitting down, we always thought, okay, what is our cash flow? Nice to have 2 months cash flow to cover, and so we're going to be below that. So I'm not advocating one way or the other, but I just wanted to have the opportunity to kind of bring up a couple of these points. So if we as board members want to kind of discuss that, it's out there, because this is a reality. If the expenses are projected as we go forward here, our general fund is already squeezed. I don't know if I have an answer, but we're going to go into another year of there's no money left for raises. That's for everybody. And I know our employees have felt that they should get more, and I can't imagine anybody that works for any employer and anywhere that wants to make more money. But I'm just a little concerned that we're pushing our rainy day cash balance down to a point that we're going to start getting uncomfortable. And I know that you guys met and you guys talked about it, and it's hard to have. I'm not much for conversation over email. I know I'm supposed to get all these questions out before the board meeting, and I'm supposed to do all of that, but this is kind of a serious issue, and I just feel more comfortable having this type of conversation with everybody face to face, because I'm kind of interested. It's hard to read people's reactions when you're sending an email, and it's hard to see people's thoughts when you're and I haven't seen much communication on it, and Karen's done a wonderful job of putting it together. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Well, first I just want to clarify that there was no direction given by the executive committee about anything in the agenda meeting. I came in and picked up my budget packet when Karen said they were ready, and I asked my questions to Karen and copied all the board members on my questions about the budget. Tonight's vote is to advertise that budget. Mm-hmm. I think, yes, it is a serious matter, and yes, we do need to have the discussion. I even asked the question, is there any way, instead of having these years, that we wind up with 10 buses this year and only 4 the next? Is there any way to even that out so we don't have these huge expenses for transportation in 1 year? And I think in 2 more years we have another where it's kind of large.
Yeah, we got 7
Yeah,
next.
so
We got 7
I
next
think-
year, and then
Yeah, I think we need to discuss maybe ways that we can level that out a little bit.
I'm not trying to say you guys made a vote in the
No,
executive session.
no, we
I
didn't.
mean, my notes, the notes that came out said that after a meeting with the executive committee, then they're going to propose the rainy day fund as a way to fund the difference. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying anything was done wrong. I think this is a topic that deserves some discussion. I don't know. I don't have any answer other than us using.
Yeah, we should have a discussion, but how do we move forward?
I'm not saying that what's proposed is not the right way to go. I'm just wanting to point out some things that I think we need to be aware of.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I mean, that's the whole reason why I brought it up, is just to spar some discussion. So I'm done. I don't really have anything else to say.
Well, because I'm not really sure, but I'm hearing what he's saying. So what happens when we get to a point where we don't have that as much reserve as we're used to having, and something major comes up? What do we do?
And that's the question that no one has the answer to tonight. What I will let the board know is right now we're just advertising the appropriation. Doesn't mean we have to use it. Doesn't mean that in January we can't have another conversation, or November, or October. It's just advertising the appropriation or the budget now, and then the determination of how to make that cash happen can happen next year. My recommendation on that is definitely see what that budget order looks like before we make any decision on how much rainy day we're going to use. Because the important part is the bus replacement plan had some changes to statutory language, and it went to a cap, a levy cap, not a rate cap. So that levy tells you all 12 years you're going to get the same amount regardless of what your plan says. So if your plan is mid-year heavy and we start you in the middle with that change to statute, you're gonna have to make it up, and then on those lean years you save until you get to those heavy years. So unfortunately for us, that change came when our plan wasn't very far into the lean years and we have the big years early. What the state tells you is, well, you'll get to your lean years, you put it back. I am not confident that is what happens, because I have seen them strip us of all of our levy at times. I don't know what the levy will look like. I have asked for 100% of our need in bus replacement, because I would like to see if it can come in higher than what our rate and levy cap is in that area. I don't expect it. I would not say that I feel confident it's going to come in like that, but I am asking for it. So if it does make the board feel any better, we do not have to have the cash conversation tonight. I think that Jeff has very excellent points that you need to be thinking about. And I think it's something that we all need to discuss further and discuss to some length, I think, because it does require planning, and it may look very different than what we've been accustomed to seeing. But tonight, what you're approving is the advertisement of just the appropriations we're going to ask for, not necessarily the cash we're going to spend.
Could you discuss maybe for just a second the other options? You made this recommendation with the information you have today and knowing what you know today, the conversations you had with student transit, you made this recommendation.
Right.
What were the other possible options for funding that you decided this was the best?
Okay. The board has the option to first look at general fund. Anything that needs purchased for the school can be purchased from general fund. So that's always an option. It's not one that we might be able to look at depending on the budget and the student count, because it is funded through student count. However, general fund is an option. It would require other possible cuts or other possible thoughts as to how those purposes are being used, but it is available. The other option is any cash balances that would exist in transportation. You could transfer to the bus replacement plan fund, or you could transfer it to rainy day and utilize rainy day funds. You could also transfer from capital projects to rainy day at any time as well. What that means to those funds is those cash balances go down, but it is an option. The other thing I looked into with our bus company who we purchase from, they do offer leasing. It is not as expensive as buying. I don't know that I would feel comfortable leasing without you guys looking at a lot of things for the future, because it looks really good on paper. I don't know that it looks good when you think about maintenance and long term. I would have to see some better things than I see right now on it. But it is an option. mean, a lot of corporations are moving that way to keep their buses up and going, but it's there for you should you need it. Those are the options that I see. I don't recommend taking debt out for buses, but you can. I don't know what that looks like. I didn't investigate it. We've been very careful not to do additional debt unless it was necessary, and I didn't want to propose
What's
that.
the risk of utilizing the cash balance out of transportation? Because you use that for other things, that's why.
Right. Right now, transportation is only seeing about $50,000 or less addition to the cash balance each year, and that's because we changed our original contract. So should gas prices go up, should the cost of maintenance go up, should there be any reason why we need to rethink that contract, I can't be guaranteed that those funds would be accumulating each year. That's my concern with transportation. We're not accruing fast enough to make up that big of a difference at one time.
And they say gas is gonna go up. We've got a lot of refineries shut down,
Hopefully short term.
hopefully.
Well, the two thoughts that I had was, one, the transportation will, even after the Sodrel contract expense is met, is going to have, I think, if I remember right, a little over $1 million cash balance. So that's one of the thoughts that I had, that was less impactful on the rainy day in the immediate term, because we could always go back to the rainy day next year if the transportation came into a problem. But the bigger issue to me personally is that, because I also had lease down as an option, because I think whatever decision we make moving forward with how we fund our shortage on the bus replacement for the next 4 years, I would much rather see a long-term plan of how we're going to solve that problem, whether that's a mix of buying and leasing, or before I take the money from the rainy day fund. The part of the reason, because the other piece of that is, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the timing, and I understand that this is just an advertisement and it's not an appropriation, but once we advertise it and it gets appropriated, then we also have an additional cost that's incurred, right, for us to go back and do a reappropriation?
Appropriation wouldn't cost, well, okay, right now we're gonna pay to advertise, and then we'll get the appropriation starting in January. And that appropriation in rainy day holds until we drop it off. So if we don't use it, we can let it go. If we want to continue to keep it, then I write it as an encumbrance in the next year's budget, and we continue that until it's ready to drop off. So doesn't mean you have to spend it, but the appropriation is there that you don't have to go back for another one.
But you don't have to go back and ask for it.
Correct, and that does cost. The advertising costs to do that, it is fairly significant. The time that it takes is about 8 to 12 weeks for everyone, so that it is significant.
It's
when
the
it comes to
labor,
that.
it's the labor part of it, I understand that. Well, that's what I'm saying, I just wanted conversation tonight, and I don't have a problem approving the advertisement moving forward with the rainy day fund, but I would also like to have the promise that we
Come back.
sit back and we talk about how we solve this problem in the next because over the next 4
Knowing
years,
what we know now, though,
we've got to
that's
buy
key.
24 buses, guys. And what we can't do is come back to the rainy day fund every year for the next years and say we need 600,000, because then we're going to be completely tapped.
And we might want to have, just because I get what you're saying, we may just want to have a special meeting just on that, because that's going to.
Budget, you mean?
Yes.
So, you know, and I'm not taking anything away from what the administration has done. I mean, they've provided us with the information. But I guess I only ask is, as we move forward, before we actually appropriate and spend the money, that we've actually got an idea of. Now, the good thing about, and is it 2019 is the last year that we're squeezed with the severance bond?
with levy neutrality, part of 2020. We'll
First
have-
payment in 2020, okay.
Yeah, so part of that year
So,
will have some.
the thing that's nice about that is, you know, that could give us back another million plus. So, so that's something that we can also factor into that conversation, but I just, you know, I'm okay moving this forward, but I just would like to have the promise that we,
And timing's gonna be an issue no matter what too, because, well, one of the things, we can't actually purchase any buses till January, right? We can't
Right.
actually, like, however, you need to place the order by January if you wanna
Right.
have them.
Unfortunately, we can't even place the bus order until we have the budget order.
Right, I
So
understand.
it could be March. Some years it's
Understand.
been
But I
March,
mean, I
but
just wanna
yes, it
make
won't be
sure we're in
before
a
then.
position
Yes.
to order as quickly as we can, so that you have them when you need them. And then the other part of the timing is, Jeff's points are well made, and then everyone knows this, and we've been talking about it for a really long time.
for a long time.
But, and the idea of a long-term plan and some of the conversations that have been had recently about, you know, do we need all the buses, leasing, all those things are really good conversations to have, but when you don't really know what the rules are gonna be next year, all you can do is do the best you can, knowing what we know now, and then have a flexible enough plan with some options so that you have some choices
Right.
going forward. So I think the idea of a conversation after, and it's a long way to say, yes, let's approve the plan to advertise, but it's a good starter, I think, to the conversation.
Yeah, because initially, I'm not so sure that I would approve actually using rainy day to purchase
I
buses.
understand,
So,
I understand that.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. Any other discussion?
One thing I might note, Mr. Slifer mentioned that because of this, we have no money for raises for anybody else. That's not quite accurate.
Well,
No, but you say that, it'll get out there.
He's the sweeping statement guy.
we've been hit with that for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm just
They've
saying.
done pretty well the last 2 or
Yes,
3
we
years.
have.
Yeah.
I
I'm
agree.
just,
They've done pretty
you
well.
know, I'm just saying that, well, you know what I'm saying.
I do
Right.
know what you're saying.
I'm not trying
I
to
hope
pigeonhole
everyone
you.
knows where I'm saying.
Unfortunately,
I'm
yeah,
not
it
trying to
does get out
pigeonhole us,
on the airwaves.
Okay. All in favor to advertise the budget? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I'm turning the next one over to you.
Okay. Our next action item is the second reading and adoption of the listed 3,000, 4,000 policies. And since I was not at the last meeting, I did want to say a huge thank you to Jennifer O'Brien, who helped us with notes and organization, because this was very complicated to take the 3,000s and 4,000s and blend them together, along with all the suggestions and deletions and additions and so forth and so on that
was
Julie
impressive.
gave us. And Brad, I know, worked really hard on this too, but Jennifer really helped us out a lot, so I did want to say a thank you to her. So, with that said, do I hear a motion that we approve the second reading and adoption of the listed 3,000, 4,000 policies? Brad? Okay, Brad makes the
I
motion.
can speak up now, I will.
Good. Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jeff seconds it. Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now we have the second reading and adoption of policy 8600 and 5771. On 8600,
I want to make a recommendation on 8600 that we, on moving it forward, we actually remove the language regarding suspension from transportation. I think it was in combining 2 other policies that we ended up sort of forcing those 2 together, and they don't really work. The part that's in green that you see is actually dealt with regarding policy, law, state law on special needs students and discipline. And so my recommendation is that we remove that language and move it to, I guess, to student code of conduct. And then in the administrative guidelines, maybe address also discipline, transportation discipline for general ed students as well.
So one of the things that I would caution is anytime we put discipline into a board policy, I'm not sure that's best practice.
Yeah.
But I would recommend that, as Mrs. Darengowski indicated, that we look at moving that into the code of conduct and at the building levels. But we know that we're already past that moving forward for this year. So what we could do for this year is put that into an admin guideline and then communicate with our administrators what our expectations are regarding discipline on school buses for both gen ed and special ed students, aligned with the expectations that are mentioned in the law, and then also our own expectations here at Richmond Community Schools.
That way that policy focuses entirely on who is eligible for transportation, what is considered a school bus, and those kinds of expectations, which fits, and then the others are more appropriately where they belong. And then, like I said, next year maybe can be moved into student conduct where they seem to make more sense.
You're talking about all the green, right?
All the green. It's all, it's weird. I've lost track of the history, but I think those two were sort of married together because they were transportation related, but there's some things that just doesn't mesh very well. And there's even no conversation regarding student behavior for anyone other than special ed students. So
I think we had a separate policy for special education.
right, and so it either belongs there or it belongs in the code of conduct, but it doesn't really belong with this policy, I don't believe. So my recommendation would be that we would move this and approve with the edit of where it stops at letter G, and the green, all that in green is removed and moved to the appropriate place.
So check.
I guess that's my motion.
Okay, move it to administrative guidelines first and then to student code of conduct. That you can add to your list.
I'll make
Well,
that
and
up.
really, as it talks about the privileges to come back in, the 10-day plan and all that kind of stuff, I mean,
That's all law.
that, yeah,
That's all
but
in- what
that's
is
all
it?
process anyway. So.
Correct, yeah, it doesn't, even if it wasn't already sort of prescribed, it's not really a policy type of piece of
And you have
information
to
anyway.
remember, these are legislative policies,
Right.
but they count as policies as long as they're
Are
in
you
the
looking for a second?
Pardon me?
Yes, we're looking for a second. Brad seconds.
Wait, Dixie, are you breaking them out, or are we just voting on 86?
Let's just vote on 8600 first, then we'll move to 5771. So,
I moved, Brad seconded.
okay. Any other comments or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now for policy 5771, which you approved at the last board meeting, but in reading my notes, we had left out a suggested sentence from Ron. So I put that in red on that policy. And so we need, I guess, a motion to approve the addition to policy 5771.
Yeah, I think it just makes common sense, so.
I make the motion that we approve the edit to policy 5771.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have one no. Motion carries. All right. Next is the first reading of the 2017 legislative policy replacements as presented on board docs. I had one correction in the alcohol and controlled substance testing policy for commercial drivers licenses for CDL employees, that we take out on the third page It says prohibited conduct. The following shall be considered prohibited conduct for purposes of this policy. This was a recommendation by Rob Tidrow, where it says no employee shall report for duty or remain on duty requiring the performance of safety-sensitive functions while having an alcoholic concentration of 0.04 or greater.
That does, yeah, because that means you're gonna have to start testing it.
Right. To remove that.
Now, do we need to remove the whole thing, or just say, remove the grade, I mean, they shouldn't report if they've had any alcohol.
Please.
I mean, I guess my question to you.
Yeah,
I mean, so do we?
zero would be the highest.
Right.
Right.
Well, right. I mean,
Exactly.
that's why I'm asking, because you were asking about removing it all?
Just number one.
Just number one.
Well, I mean, but that's my question. Do we want to remove the whole thing, or just say no employee with any alcohol?
Under the influence, period.
Yeah, period.
Sensitive functions while being under the influence of alcohol.
Although you're kind of saying the same things in the next couple ones.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it already covered.
Yeah, it
I
looks like
think it is in here
Yeah.
somewhere.
So just remove it and renumber.
Mhm.
I think that does it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Did we have a motion?
Are you doing them all together or as a group?
We're just on 5771. I'm sorry, no, all of them. Do you want to do them all as a group?
I just had a question about did anyone confirm that the Hatch Amendment being part of No Child Left Behind is still applicable?
Yeah, these are legislative policies that came in, so they,
But it's referencing No Child Left Behind.
Which is the prerogative of our legislators to.
So that came from them
yeah.
with that included.
Yep.
Of course it did.
In other words, my understanding is they passed this and gave it to us and said, go do it. We don't have the option to.
Remove that.
Didn't want to make us approve it.
Because if you don't, they can nail you.
Okay. Do you want to do them all? Since we've corrected the one, I think everything else is fine. So do we hear a motion that we approve the first reading of the 2017 legislative policy replacements with the correction on the alcohol and controlled substance testing policy?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Debbie makes the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And now that we're at the end of the policy section, I will tell you that on that very last page of other things that she suggested, that I sat down with Chuck this weekend, or this past week, and we found where all the things about students were located in either administrative guidelines or in the student code of conduct, so we are covered. There's about 4 that we're going to be adding to student code of conduct that were suggestions. There were
You recall the ISBA does publish a quarterly policy publication. And then obviously after the legislative session has passed, that tends to have more volume to it as far as if there's been much activity in the area of public education. That could be the vehicle by which it comes to you, the board's attention on arguably a quarterly basis a month afterwards. Give the other board members enough lead time that they could be, getting their thoughts together on other areas that may or may not be addressed in what the ISBA sent out. And that would at least have a structure that would force you to have to be somewhat attentive to the issue, and not just like we fear, putting in all this work, put it on the shelf, and then 2 years later, you're back where you started.
Yes, because this has been a huge amount of work,
I commend you for it.
so. And I'm sure that Kim will be glad when this is over, too. Okay. So I think that takes care of policies, so now, back to you.
All right. 6.06, the Washington DC field trip. I'm going to ask Dr. Reynolds if he would speak to this, please.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Very excited time of year again where we're gearing up for the 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. Kristen Shear is a teacher at Dennis and will be heading up the logistics of the trip for all 3 buildings, and then each building will have someone that will kind of spearhead the fundraising. But
Excuse me, could you give me her name again?
I'm sorry.
Who'd you say?
Kristen Shear.
Kristen Shear.
Okay.
But tonight I'm asking for approval for the 8th graders at Dennis, Hibbard, and Test to participate in the Washington, D.C. field trip from May 21st to May 25th. It's a terrific educational opportunity and one of the great traditions that we have in Richmond. So if you'll see on that second attachment is the trip proposal with all their educational activities they'll be doing. It's similar to last year and quite the educational trip. So I asked for approval this evening for that field trip, and they'll get started on their fundraising opportunities.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the Washington DC field trip?
To approve the Washington DC field trip proposal.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll
Jeff
second.
seconds it. Okay, any comments or discussion?
I want to go.
I just want to say, I know this is something the kids really look forward to every year, and when you read some of their memos and discussions later on, or when they get out of school, they still talk about that Washington DC field trip. So I think it's a great opportunity for them.
We did not get any feedback from them, I don't recall, this past year, or maybe not even the year before, when they have gone and
We
they've
did the
come
year
back.
before, but
The year
maybe not this
before.
year.
Not this year. Okay.
Change of personnel.
That's it.
Yeah.
If we could, because I think it's invaluable to us when they come back and we see some of their, the efforts that they have made, not only to raise the money, but also some of the things that they have learned. It's a historic opportunity for them when you look at all the places that they're going, places that a lot of Americans have never been, but some very, very, very sentimental locations in our nation's history, and just to see how it transforms even their thoughts as students of history. It's invaluable when they come back and give us that report, but also what the public
They do
sees
do
as
a
well.
nice job in real time while they're there.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
And so you can kind of
Watch
stay
their
fairly
progress.
abreast of where they're at and what they're doing, which I think it's a great use of the platform.
That's a great point.
Agree with that. That's awesome.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now we're ready for board reports and old business.
So our first board report tonight is review of policy 2265. And with the permission of the board, I'd like to ask Mr. Cochran, who is our athletic director, and Mrs. Wolpe, if you guys would come up and join us at the table here. One of you can sit there by Kim and the other over here by Jennifer. And then at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Robinson and ask for you to guide us through this process.
Okay, John, do you want to start us with your suggestions?
Just are coming on the board, and I know historically the board has had kind of a policy that extracurricular and co-curriculars were strictly for RCS students. I felt there was an opportunity in discussing with board members, administrators, teachers, that we might be able to look at that policy and see if there's a way to open our doors, so to speak, and serve some of the students that haven't been served in the past. And so with that, it seemed the best place to start was at the K through 8, maybe removing those restrictions so a schooler could participate in, say, choir or athletics or some of the things that we offer, utilizing the facilities that their tax dollars pay for, but also experiencing RCS and hopefully making that choice as they move forward in their education to come to RCS and be part of our community here. And so the goal was to strip those requirements for K through 8 and present the policy with those changes.
Okay, Ray, could you give us, or either one of you, give us any input on, I know IHSAA is 9 through 12, but they have guidelines.
Correct, and Larry has spoken with the IHSAA commissioners. There was a new rule put in, what, 2 years ago?
Let's see, this is 17, so it was about
Yeah.
2015.
It's called an undue
It's
influence.
called undue influence,
The past
Rule
link,
20.
so Larry can,
Rule 20, yep.
Larry can talk.
pages 90 through 94.
You got it.
But we were quite the topic of discussion in the IHSA staff meeting this morning, which is not a bad thing, because I did call when I'm not 100% sure, and a lot of times I am sure, but in the IHSA rule book, there's a lot of gray matter. And so when it was brought to me on Monday, late Monday afternoon, I dug into it, and basically what I got back from them today, early afternoon, is that there's no governance on middle school athletics through the IHSA, but we are possibly walking down a slippery slope with that policy, including athletics, because of the undue influence. And quoting, but not verbatim, by the one assistant commissioner that called me, was that if we include all athletics and we have our high school coaches go down to our feeder schools and talk to those kids, or we allow that feeder team to come to a high school event and those kids aren't our enrolled kids, that somewhere down the line somebody could question us on undue influence. Now, whether the IHSA would rule favorably or negatively against us if somebody accused us of that, we just don't know if we're in that situation. And the only way to prevent that would be to, and I was told this, would be to make sure that our 7th and 8th grade coaches, there's also a new rule called the Pass Link Rule, and it was actually put in to protect schools from hiring AAU coaches, is what it was really meant for. But because of the undue influence in the Pass Link, it may prevent us from promoting coaches who are 7th and 8th grade coaches when those kids who end up coming to RCS that weren't ours per se show up. We might not be able to promote those coaches into high school coaching positions, because then we would get caught in the Pass Link Rule. So it's not as easy as it sounds. One thing that was also brought up, which I don't know the area enough yet, I'm learning. If we would institute this rule, what's to say that the outer lying communities like a Northeastern, a Hagerstown, a Connorsville, Centerville would not institute the same rule and then start coming after our elementary and middle school kids? Because if we instituted that rule and they saw that policy, they may want to do the same thing. And then now we're talking about possibly recruiting elementary and middle school kids. So those were the things that were thrown at me that I'm sharing with you that came from the IHSA. And I was told was about an hour topic of discussion this morning in their staff meeting. Which, like I said, is not a bad thing.
How would that?
And one thing I want to point out on the new proposal on this policy is that it is called out for students in the district. So it wouldn't be asking Centerville kids or Northeastern
No, I
kids.
understand that, but it's not going to stop them, Brad, from instituting a policy at a Centerville that could say out-of-district kids.
Well, and that might not necessarily be true, because if they're a private school student, that doesn't mean they necessarily live in Richmond.
Well,
They
and
might go to
could
school
we
in
actually
Richmond.
prohibit someone from Northeastern playing in our athletic in the middle school? I mean, let's say we have
If they go, right now our policy is if they are a half-time student with us, they can
Well,
participate.
I understand, but I mean, if we would institute and say, okay, if you're in the middle school, right now, we're thinking of homeschooled student or a private school student, but how would they look at a student currently enrolled in Northeastern that lives in Richmond District, or it wouldn't matter where school they go to, yet would they be allowed to participate
That's a fair question.
coming back into the Richmond school system?
And Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but by law, homeschool and non-accredited schools can participate.
In the home district, excuse me, but in the home district that they live, they have to participate in the home where their address, they have to participate in that school.
Right.
But yes, that rule was put into effect about 5 years ago with homeschool and non-accredited.
And then regarding things that actually have a grade attached to them, such as choir, which I believe there's a grade, right? That's a
Correct.
That's a course for credit. That's a little different because they can come in and sign up for, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what this says. They could come in as a student in a private school and sign up for a course for credit called choir because it has a grade to it and they can sign up for that. Is that right?
Yes.
Without having to sign up for 3 or 4, they can just sign up for that one. If they live in, well, I guess it doesn't matter where they live.
Right.
Because of,
Well, not Ohio.
right, in the state of Indiana, in the state of Indiana. So course for credit versus an extracurricular or co-curricular activity, those are two different things, right? Okay.
But at the K through 8 level, I mean, the rule was enrolled in at least 50% of the day's classes. I
For
think
the
that's
non-
more a 9-12.
They still could come in and take one class. I mean, we have a student right now at Test who is participating in, they wanted to be in Just Art. And so they're coming in and taking Just Art.
Because it has a grade attached to it, that's different, right?
Correct.
Okay. So,
Which is the same thing with band in the summer, because they can get band credit.
Correct. They have to
It
be,
is-
they have to be enrolled for credit.
It is nice talking about this in a non-heated situation.
indeed.
I mean, we had a pretty heated situation a couple years ago, when
So, it might be worth restating that our current policy is for extracurricular, including athletics, a student 9 to 12 needs to be enrolled in 3, is that right? 3 or more courses.
See, it's really a moot point at the high school level.
Yes.
Because you cannot have a Centerville, Northeastern, Seton, you cannot have any of those, they cannot be enrolled in
One school and play at
school
another.
and play athletics in another school.
Okay.
So 9 through 12 is really a moot point. It addresses the homeschool kids.
Okay, so, but homeschool can come and play no matter what.
As long as they're,
they
what
live
our
in the
policy
district.
said,
Oh,
as
I
long
gotcha.
as they're
3
enrolled in 3
credit.
classes.
I got you, okay.
Yeah, we had an athlete the last 2 years that was homeschooled and came to Richmond and enrolled in our RGA, our online program, to get her 3 classes to be eligible.
Now, what's the IHSA say on that as far as the homeschool students? Are they eligible to participate in the home districts, public school districts athletic program?
Yeah, they just have to provide all the academic information when it's requested.
But
Like
they do not require them to be enrolled in that
That's
school.
correct. They can be a full-time homeschool student.
Okay,
They don't, but our policy does.
right. That's what I was trying to clarify there. Okay.
We can also add language, because, for instance, Richmond offers football that the private schools do not offer, where we could allow a K through, a middle school, intermediate student to participate in our football program without crossing into the undue influence.
I think
area.
it would still be risky though, because all it takes is a complaint. We've learned that before.
Right, Larry said that if one of our 7th or 8th grade football coaches was moved up to the high school staff, then someone that's not happy with us could say, oh my gosh, that's a past link. You know, that coach was recruiting Larry
At the middle school
at
level.
the middle school level, and now Larry's going to Richmond High School, so.
And the penalties are, I know they're worse for the student.
Severe, yes.
Well, they can be. It goes as much as far as that young person is ineligible for athletics, period.
Right.
To as much as, you know,
Yeah,
the
it's
coach being removed. And again, it was an AAU rule, to be quite honest with you. It was
I can see
schools
why.
going out and hiring those AAU coaches so their kids would show up at their schools. But in our situation here, it's also catching that end of it because it's there.
And how does the Hub Etchison Youth League, would that play, that doesn't play into
It doesn't play into it because it's not
It's not a school program.
It's not a school program.
Okay.
It's like Little League Baseball.
Okay.
One of the concerns I have about that, now that you just said what you said, is one of the things that we have sort of expected, and I don't know that we've ever written it down anywhere, is that we want our high school coaches to be intricately involved
They have to
in
be.
the middle school and the
They
elementary
absolutely have to
programs.
be.
And so it kind of causes an extra little piece of concern for me, because if you want to do that and do that correctly, you would want your head coach to reach down into the elementary and middle school programs. And so now if they do that, then you could be accused of
Absolutely.
having a recruitment program going on.
Well, and I know grades are monitored at the high school, but I assume they're monitored at the intermediate schools for play.
Not quite as stringent as they are at the high school, but what it is, it's
'Cause I
a
used to
precursor
sign
to
off.
precursor to get them ready to experience that. And actually, that's one of the things that we're working through even now, with our review that we're going to be going through with our athletic department at the high school, also the intermediate and elementaries, to look at what does that need to look like as we move forward.
I think you may have just answered my question. You know, unfortunately, the AAU movement, whether it be in any of the sports, basketball in particular, football, soccer, and everything else, has become that demon that has created a lot of the furor, not just with the IHSA, but around the country. And I think you may have just addressed it, but I'm hoping, based upon that past link conversation, that our coaches, most of them are lay coaches, have gone through some in-depth informative study or informative sessions in regards to that new current ruling and everything else, because, to use your term, it is a slippery slope. And it can be construed simply because this kid is outstanding, but he doesn't belong to us. Great relationship with the coach, new football coach. Hey, let's move this guy up, because it could be perceived he's moved up to entice.
Yes.
And everything.
I think that education has to continue. I mean, I've not been here long enough yet, but I can tell you in my head coaches staff meeting that I had earlier, and it was just head coaches, but our high school coaches, assistant coaches, they all have to go through some NFHS training. Unfortunately, that part of it, they have to get certification in illness and concussion, illness and heat, cardiac stuff. But that part of it's not there, but I'm going to get us there so that they all understand and not put us in a position. I can tell you I was fortunate when I was here about the second week. I got a call, I think it was from Miss Hazelbaker, but I got a call from somebody letting me know we were having a student from Seton enroll that was going to be a freshman that had been a Richmond kid but then went to Seton but was a basketball player, and they were letting me know. So I let our coach know that he was not to have any conversations with that young lady until I knew that she was officially enrolled.
Right.
Because I didn't want to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the second week, and so Coach Polans was on board with that, and I made sure that, and she is enrolled, so there can be, there will be, or could be, but we did what we were supposed to do at Richmond in that situation.
I think if I remember correctly, part of the, I think what really kind of brought, and we're only talking right now about football, and I mean, you mentioned that, but I'm assuming you're talking about academic teams and choir and all these other stuff that goes on.
Well, we
but-
now have an intermediate swimming program that we haven't had in the past, and I believe it's the only one in the area.
So, but I think part of what brought up the concern a couple of years ago, and I think I'm correct on this, was there was actually a student that came in from another school corporation that, into one of the intermediate schools and ended up was a better player than one of the students, matter of fact, disrupted the student from that position, and it literally made that Richmond student sit on the bench, and the parent was fairly upset over that, and I think there was other people, and I think that's what kind of,
And the policy hadn't been looked
the
at.
policy hadn't been looked at in years, and we were kind of caught off guard, but I mean, I know we're trying to look and balance many things, but part of that is, and I think I discussed this when John and I talked about it, is part of my concern was, as I had difficulty then, if I was a parent of that student and my student was the enrolled student, and my student had to sit on the bench because someone that was not enrolled in the district, I would be upset as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that's the only way to look at this. but
Well,
I
the other
think-
part that it's difficult for us to talk about because no one likes to talk about it, but the reality of our situation currently is that we're being competitive, we have to be competitive for students. And while you could argue that being able to offer sports to or other activities to non-enrolled students might influence them to come in, the reality is you're kind of giving away your competitive advantage if you do that.
Well, the reality is we're losing the kids because of our policy.
Right.
And I have a list of names I can go through, and kids that are going to other districts because they've had poor experiences trying to do extracurriculars when they were homeschooled. And I'm not saying there's not on both sides, but I have actual people that I know do not go to RCS because of this policy.
So they don't go to RCS as intermediate school students because another school is letting them participate there,
No,
or they
because
enrolled
they
at another
weren't
school?
welcomed as intermediate students, and so now when they're choosing their high school, they're making a different choice.
So were they welcomed at a competitive school
They made a
when they
different
weren't
choice.
a student here?
I do not know that.
Okay.
I'm not clear. They chose another school for a student that's in an intermediate grade, but they had not previously
There was a
been.
homeschool family that was basically told that they weren't welcome to participate, and so now all three children are at Centerville. That's just one family.
But why wouldn't just a strictly homeschool person been allowed to, even at the intermediate level? Does that policy stop them from that,
Yes.
the way it reads?
Homeschool, that's a law.
It says they have to be installed in.
But our
three
policy
courses.
Oh, okay.
adds additional guidelines, which requires them to be
So
Three
for half of the
classes.
day at the intermediate level.
And so the issue becomes, if you consider that, then can you just say homeschool? Because then you enter into the private schools, you enter in the private schools that don't have swimming, you enter in the private schools that don't have football.
The only difference is, I don't mean to interrupt, is there is a homeschool policy at the IHSAA. Homeschool kids are allowed to participate.
Whether they're enrolled or not, according to the IHSAA.
According to
And
the
then we have a
IHSA,
policy,
that
again,
says they have to be
because
enrolled.
we've had a
So
conversation
that's just
about
for K,
competition.
or 9 through 12.
Right, and what I'm saying though is if you amended your policy so it just applied to homeschool students and not public or private entity the way it reads now. You know, if you I'm just saying if you adopted it, you may not be in that situation. If you allowed the homeschool, use the same rule at the high school level, use the same rule at the intermediate level.
I just think that this opens us up to a bigger, broader, more vision and more of an opportunity for us to bring kids into our school and to make I don't know, I've always thought that was so rigid in the past. And to be able to offer this type of program to other kids who don't have the access to it is a great thing. And we might be kind of the first ones doing it, and change is not always a good thing to offer change, but it's a good thing if we look at it in a positive manner instead of looking at it like this is gonna do this. This is, I mean, anytime you make a change, it's gonna do some
But it
stuff.
comes with super concerns. The athletic concern is one for me. The competition is a concern. The, how does a coach, whether a lay coach or a teacher coach, manage a student who is not connected to the school they work for? That is another concern I have. So, and it's happening other places. I haven't done that kind of research, but, so you have a student that doesn't belong to Richmond Community Schools per se. I hate to use those terms because they're not a possession, but, the student is not in the hallways of our school. I realize they're subject to the athletic discipline. Well, I don't know, are they? I mean, so how do you manage that?
This has been some time ago, but when I was in 7th and 8th grade, we had 3 students from Seton that played on our basketball team, and all 3 of them started. Now, I understand that Seton didn't have a high school at that time, but still, that goes back to the 8th grade and below. They weren't enrolled with RCS and participated, and I didn't complain about not starting. I just tried to get better.
Well, I think that's the point that we made a few minutes ago, a couple of years ago. We hadn't addressed that policy and where we were caught off guard.
Right.
Well, and I would just like, well, I'm just going to say exactly what I said 3 years ago. I mean, I really do understand all the sides. I really do. And I can understand why coaches would like to have everybody, especially with declining enrollment on teams and stuff like that. But I would prefer that the policy remain as it is, because I do think it's fair to all sides. If you want to go to a private school, you can for half a day for your religious instruction or whatever else it is that you want. But as far as saying the same thing I said in 2014 when we last had this discussion on this policy, I was elected as a school board member for Richmond Community Schools, and that's who I represent. I represent the students and the parents and the teachers and the administrators and the staff. I also represent our vision and our mission and our belief statements and our board goals that help guide our students on their paths to success. I consider extracurricular activities as part of the total package that we offer to our students. And I hope that we're able to visualize and actualize our vision, our mission, our belief statements, and our goals through the total package that we offer to our students here in Richmond. And if those places are taken by others that have made a different choice, then, and that they're not enrolled here, then I feel we're doing our enrolled students a disservice. I want our students to have every available opportunity to help them grow to be successful members of society. And we've often talked of how extracurricular activities help students stay in school, it keeps their grades up, it teaches them good work ethics, perseverance, teamwork, community service, responsibility, and values. And I want that for the students that we serve here in Richmond Community Schools. I would love to have it for all students, but my work is for Richmond Community Schools.
Yeah, to be a devil advocate and jumped on the other side of the fence, I wonder, the question that we're asking ourselves is, could we grow enrollment? Could we bring more students into the system? Could we, I guess another question, if you're going to ask, would we possibly lose enrollment? If we open the doors to allow you not to be an RCS student,
would we lose students because of that? I mean, have we asked ourselves that? I mean, that's an interesting, I just now thought of it. Wow, I can think quick.
I think that would be a concern too.
How many people have their kids in RCS for the opportunities to play
That's a
sports,
fair
or
question.
orchestra or choir?
Yeah, I mean.
We sell ourselves as that's one of the great things about
Sure.
RCS is
All the opportunities.
But I also understand, especially for those residents that live in the city of Richmond, you know, capital projects is funded from property tax. So I do understand that. It's portioned right.
and as that was shifted several years ago to how schools are funded, the biggest funding we get is the ADM per capita. And so when my kid goes to Richmond Community Schools, the dollars that they're bringing in then are providing those opportunities for students who don't go here and we do not get any money for. And that's a concern.
And we pay our coaches out of general fund.
We do.
Because that's part of the question, part of the problem I had is where we draw the line. You know, that's why I asked the questions about.
That's the slope I'm worried about too.
Yeah, I mean, academic teams and the garden clubs and, you know, not that I don't think we would limit any students. I don't think those have limits on the middle school students, but it's a tough question. I mean, it's a tough issue for some people.
I think we've tried the policy as is, and I think it's well worthy to open the doors and show people what we have. And if a young child has a great experience in orchestra as a 6th grader, and all they want to do is play in the high school orchestra, I think that is valuable, and I think it's worth trying. And I think to continue this mentality of, yes, there's some concerns, and I think we can address the athletic concerns. But to kind of keep the wall built around us, I think is wrong. I think if we're here to serve children in our district, in Wayne County, in Richmond, I mean, I was elected by the entire town. I mean, everyone that lives in Richmond votes for us, not just people that are in RCS. And I think to better serve students, I think this is the way to go. I think we can have reasonable requirements, we can have uniform rentals, we can have activities fees if that's so desired. But I think if we say we're to serve students and children, we've tried the policy as is, and all I've seen is that we've shunned students and we've lost students. I mean, I have names.
Do you have any evidence of those we didn't lose that we actually got because of it?
No. I mean, I know there's certain kids that have come here, but I don't know that they wouldn't have come here anyway.
And likewise.
So.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
how they may have gone somewhere else.
True.
The list of names you have could have made the same exact decision they made,
They could have.
regardless.
Yeah,
But, you know, positive experience
yeah.
is a pretty strong selling point.
Yeah, I mean, and I get what you're saying, but we're just in such a different environment than when that was, even when you were in school.
And we talk about education changing and this and that, and how we do things differently, and yet on this policy, we're gonna do it like we've always done it. You know,
This
we're
isn't
talking
how we
about, you know, we're gonna have blended learning and this and that, but yet on this policy, we're not gonna change. We're gonna do it like we always have, and I think I mean, okay, we can revisit this next year. If it was a failure, we can go back to how it was, but I think it's definitely worth trying, and I think the risk, the reward far exceeds the risk we put at. I think we're talking about kids and positive experiences, and I think if we can make those things happen, I think it's well worth trying.
But it's very difficult to go back.
And I'm concerned too about the fact changing this policy doesn't address all of the fallout. I think there's a whole bunch of other things we'd have to look at about our student code of conduct. I mean, I think there's some other things we'd have to look at. I don't think just changing this one fixes it, because like I said, I'm concerned. You got coaches who now would be managing students that have no connection to Richmond Community Schools on a daily basis. So I don't know how, I mean, I feel like that would happen.
I mean, initially, the policy was to be K through 12, and we backed it down to K through 8 to try to, let's roll it in a little slower and be a little more
And
conservative.
to kind of be devil's advocate from what you just said, the kids don't have any connection to RCS. This could be their connection to get them in the door, to
No, I'm
open their-
saying,
I understand.
from the
I
purpose of the
understand.
coaches
No,
and the
I-
teachers, how do you
I get
deal
that,
with
but,
that?
you know, I'm looking at both sides of this. And
Me too, I'm trying to,
I'm-
but like I said,
it's-
for example, a lay coach is trying to coach, he's got 3 students that don't go to this school. He's trying to manage behavior and what, schedules and
Grades.
and they make no money. I
Right.
mean, their dollars per hour are minuscule, so it almost feels like and maybe it's one kid, I don't know, but now all of a sudden, this is what I'm talking about, fallout. I can just see on an operation point of view, now how is that person gonna manage that? Now you not only have to talk to all the RCS teachers, which at least you work for them, but now you gotta try to figure out how to deal with private school teachers and how do you hold them to that, because that's not the school you work for. And so I love the altruistic idea of it generally, but I feel like we're just in a world where we
Well,
have to
we're
be
not in a world, because you can go over to Ohio and this works extremely well, where you have homeschoolers playing varsity sports at the high school level, and I don't hear these horror stories you guys are bringing up. I'm not saying it could never happen, but, I think we are put ourselves at a disadvantage by holding on to this old
One
way
thing
of
I don't
thinking.
know about Ohio is, can a student in Ohio go to any school in the state of Ohio? Or do they have open enrollment? Do you know? Because that's where I get hung up. If I were in a highly competitive business, I get hung up on that.
I think
Giving
one of my
away
big-
the competitive advantage.
One of
I
my
get
biggest
hung up on
problems with the policy, the way it reads right now, is at the high school level, they have to be enrolled in 3 courses. Because the IHSAA has laws in there that homeschool kids can participate in the public school, correct?
Right.
But we have extra stipulations on there saying you can't unless you're enrolled in 3 classes. I think that deters a lot right there.
Do we have any numbers
Need money for
that we can attach to any of
I was
this?
just getting ready to say, I have not experienced a lot of homeschool students wanting to participate in athletics at the high school level. I think maybe we've had a couple. And again, it's only homeschool that is affected 9 through 12. And I think the policy that we're talking about is really, we're talking
Much
about
for
K
the
through 8.
lower grades.
And I think that, John, that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
thought was, we'll try it there, and then
Yeah, because you can't, the only way you can participate in Richmond High School athletics is if you are enrolled at Richmond High School, or if you are a homeschool student.
Still enrolled for 3
Enrolled in
classes.
at least 3
still
classes.
And then you're enrolled in
So you have to
3
be enrolled,
classes.
period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, I would not think it would, if we would change the rules for homes versus private versus, I don't think we should have different rules. If a student is homeschooled or a student is going to private school, I don't think we should create policy that puts one group over another group. So, I'm
State
not
looks at them
for-
different because they're not attached to a school that would
Right.
potentially have athletic programs that you were potentially trying to lure them away from. That's why the state looks at it differently.
Right.
Grades 9 through 12, you really don't have an option if you're an IHSA school. I mean, you have to distinguish that. For instance, a kid at Seton Hill, just at Seton, I mean, just because they don't have football, cannot come to Richmond and play football because Seton is an IHSA member. I dealt with that.
Now, I got a question to follow on that right real quick. The undue pressure,
Undue influence.
thank you, undue influence, would that have merit in that case where a kid from Seton plays football in 8th grade, enrolls in Richmond as a 9th grader, as Seton does not offer football?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that comes into play even now without that rule.
I mean,
I'm sure there are parents that look at that in a lot of places and see what athletic programs are offered, and if that, if they're a family that has been a Seton family, I'm just using this as an example, have been a Seton family all along, and their kid has played hub football and junior league football, and they know that kid's going to be a good football player, they're going to end up enrolling at Richmond anyway, because they want him to play football. I mean, I have to use past experience, and coming from Evansville, we have a school down there called Signature School. And it's a very high academic, achieving, you have to apply to get in. But they're an IHSA school that only offers cross-country, track, and golf. And I get calls every fall because their kids want to play soccer. I'm sorry, you can't. They're an IHSA member school. You can't play at one IHSA member school, irregardless of what they offer, compared to the other. And I'm just speaking on the 9 through 12. That there's not that. The only options at 9 through 12, if you're an IHSA member, to be a homeschool student or enrolled in your school. And the homeschool policy is whatever the district decides that policy is for the homeschool, which our district has decided it's 3 classes.
And I guess that's where I was going at is how much influence is that unfair influence law going to have, or how much merit is it going to have if you have a kid who plays 7th and 8th grade football that goes to Seton and then enrolls in Richmond as a 9th grader?
There would be none because they don't have football. There's no undue influence.
That's what
and
I was getting
told
at.
by that commissioner, assistant commissioner today. If it was sports specific, you would not be going down that gray line as much.
Okay.
So.
I still have this concern of why somebody chooses not to enroll their children in Richmond Community Schools in those early years. I'm very supportive of families who want to homeschool or have their children in a private school if it's based upon family beliefs, religious principles or something, because it offers a better environment wherever they may have their son or daughter go to based upon their family principles and beliefs. I certainly understand that, and public education can't compete with the private doctrine of religion, in the public setting. My concern are those parents who I speak with who will openly say, I do not want my kids going to Richmond Community Schools because of this or that, and I don't want them to be around those type of kids or those types of students. And that is not just here at Richmond. That's what public education is facing around the country. We have, again, going down that road of the haves and the have-nots. I do not want and based upon so many different socioeconomic concerns, but families who say, I don't want my kids in that type of environment. And that's where my concern lies. If your son or daughter, and you want them to participate in our athletics or extracurricular activities, yet you feel that you don't want them to be around on a regular basis, on a, all-day basis or even a part-time basis with the kids that public education serves, that's where my concern really lies. And I think, we wear, a lot of us wear this bracelet, proud to be public. Proud to be public. Public encompasses so many things. Public encompasses families that do not have as much as others. Public encompasses, children who are coming who have IEPs. Public encompasses kids who have special handicaps and special needs. And unfortunately, public also is that, that represents the very thing that some families say, I don't want my children to be involved with. I'm not saying that it's for every family says that is the reason why, but there are so many out there. And my concern again is if our athletics, whether it be K through 8 or 9 through 12, is good enough to have your son or daughter, you want them to participate, then, let's look beyond just the athletics. Let's look about the academic curriculum and the opportunities that we at Richmond Community Schools have to offer them and say, if they're good enough to do this, they're good enough to participate and receive the educational opportunities that we have to offer. So,
Well, my question to that, Aaron, is it's a very great point. Are athletics and extracurricular activities a way to break down a barrier?
it always,
Because a lot of the behaviors, 7th and 8th graders, are learned behaviors from parents. They believe stereotypes. They believe everything their mom and dad says. And you were an athlete.
Yep.
I was an skin color, socioeconomics. Okay. I don't care if you have money. I don't care if you don't. We were teammates.
right.
Okay. And you see somebody on a different level because you're putting in work. And is that an area to bridge a gap, to maybe look at things on a different light, and maybe parents see something there that, hey, these kids at Richmond aren't bad, man. They get a bad rap.
You know,
I don't
Brad,
know.
I agree with that, and I've always been a believer that extracurricular opportunities that we offer so many of them, whether it be extracurricular, you know, with music, arts, or in sports, can be that bridge, is that bridge. And the kid who's out there putting in that time and that effort to practice and wear that uniform and get to know his or her peers in that sport, they develop that understanding that, oh wow, this is the bridge that goes beyond race, socioeconomics, or anything else. But they don't always, that doesn't always transcend into the thought process of the parent.
You're right.
And that's, again, goes, because ultimately that decision is going to come down not to the student, but to the parent. I'm just, you know, those are real points. I just want you
Well,
to.
and I think we have to, because we talked about it in the board meeting that we had 3 years ago, that athletics and extracurriculars and all those are actually extensions of our classroom.
It should be.
And the things that we want to enhance and develop from our classrooms. And I think we have to kind of look at that. And I remember Jeff saying, you know, about the fairness issue, if it were my kid that got bumped from a team because we were allowing other people in, and I had been loyal to Richmond Community Schools by being enrolled here, I would be angry.
Well, choice is a big topic, and I've always said, I bring it on. I think Richmond stands up tall next to any choice that's available in Wayne County. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. So I kind of am where you are, Dixie, about the fact that honoring the folks who chose to come here and chose to enroll here. I get concerned a little bit. What happens if, you know, half the middle school soccer team is non-Richmond kids? I'm like, are we honoring the folks who chose to enroll in Richmond Community Schools? And I get it that you think it's archaic. I really understand why you think that, but I'm struggling with that.
Well, and in the future, not now, but in the future, with finances, with schools being what they are, it may eventually come to the point that we have to have community teams. I mean, it may be that way someday. Right now, I kind of have to stick with Richmond. I don't know, but does anyone else have any comments, any other comments they want to make? Do you want to?
I think I'd like to see a list of sports that we can include in the policy, such as football, swimming, that would not have the undue influence tag, and then would see how we can include those. And I would like to keep moving forward with the change.
My issue with that is I'm not sure you have agreement on the fact that people want to single those out. But I get what you're saying.
Well, that's I guess what I would propose then. I think there's, I don't know how the policy obviously needs a little touch-up in that regard, but
would you be willing to table this upon further review with the sports
I mean, that's,
That would be
to continue a
nice.
discussion next
I
meeting?
think the board makeup is different than it was 3 years ago. I think the environment's different, and I think that the policy, I think if we can table it with the changes, and then get the changes made, I think we can revisit it with a shorter discussion, and unless you want to take a straw poll of the board, I mean, I don't know.
Even
I
if
would
there was,
like-
even if there was language in here that said, referencing this is for, activities and extracurriculars that are not currently offered by a private school.
I'd like to have some information of how others are doing it, because I'm not sure I'm still comfortable with that.
I guess I've really tried to listen with an open mind tonight, and I guess based on the evidence that I've heard, I haven't heard enough evidence that wants me to continue. I guess I haven't heard enough evidence tonight to change my mind. I mean, personally, I just soon us decide whether we do that by vote or what, whether we even move on. As far as I'm concerned, I think I'm okay with the policy as it is, and I'm not interested in changing it. So I'm not trying to be rude or crude or draw everybody's time out, but if we have a majority of the board that wants to move forward and change the policy, then by all means, that's the will of the board. But I think I have a bigger problem tweaking it and letting this sport only, and
agree
this
with that.
sport, and this homeschool, and you know, before too long, we're going to say, okay, private school can do soccer, homeschool can do football, you know, all schools can do garden club. I just, I don't want to go there.
You want
do
to,
that.
What now?
We used to have,
Yeah.
do you want to just bring it to a vote now?
So,
To
Whether
move
we leave
forward
it, yeah, no, to leave it the same, or
for further review.
for further review?
What would there be, what would need to be reviewed? That is my question, that we have not discussed or know of right now.
I think we-
I'm not so sure
I
that.
think the athletic language would have to be added.
Open it for review, with change.
what sports would be eligible, so it
So-
wouldn't fall into the
The
undue.
only problematic point is for the, I don't know why I can't say
You're
it.
assuming
Undue
that everyone is
influence.
agreeable to that, and I think that, I'm not sure
I
there's
mean,
a
that
majority.
that may be true, but I mean, as far as for the policy to move forward, that's the only get around now is the undue influence. So if we want this policy to move forward with the changes, we need to address the undue influence component, which would be the revision. And I understand Jeff, but I don't know any other workaround other than to call out certain sports.
I think the real question is there enough members on the board who want to move forward with any further discussion, or do you feel like it's a moot point?
May I ask this question to the athletic director?
Yes, sir.
This policy as it stands right now, does it give you all the necessary groundwork and framework to guide athletics, not only at the high school, but also in the middle schools?
I believe so. I mean, it's about Richmond Community School kids that are currently enrolled.
The middle school didn't have anything. The high school has something in place with regard to homeschool. The middle school has nothing. And that's a problem.
Are you talking about the homeschool rule?
Yeah, it says they have to be enrolled half-day.
For middle school, that's in his policy?
Yes.
It's in
Or
the-
the current
this-
policy?
That's the current policy.
Current policy.
Sorry.
I don't know, I think we're just gonna kind of have to all voice where we are. Personally, I'm with Jeff.
Yeah, I am too.
Can someone make the motion then to either leave it as it is, or?
I think that's what we'll have to do.
Well, I guess I guess at this point, I'd like to make a motion that we leave the policy as it stands. I think it best suits us. I've not heard the evidence to to change the policy, so I don't see, I'm good with the policy as it's written.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah.
So
Three
we'll
of
have
us.
to poll the board. Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Nay.
Aye.
That just doesn't sound right, does it?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, it's 4-3, motion carries.
Okay, our next board report this evening is board goals and metrics, especially in light of the hour in which we find ourselves. What I am not going to do is sit here and read this to you. You've all had this information for several days and had the opportunity to go through there. What we did was last year, as you guys will recall,
Thank you, guys.
as you guys will recall, we were asked to come up with metrics to align them with the goals, the board goals that are in place. So what I've done there, with help from the cabinet and directors, we've gone through and in red identified the areas that address the metrics as they were laid out. And at this time, what I'd like to do is just open it up. If you have questions about any particular areas or need more explanation, we'd be more than happy to do that at this time.
The only thing I would have to say is that on some of the listings, if we could see data or results, that was my only.
Do you have any in particular?
I think I mentioned,
Everybody should have this document at your desk too.
Yeah, we do.
here it is. On the, I think I mentioned partnerships. And also like professional support and advancement opportunities, if you could give us like examples.
You're talking about data on the evaluation.
Yeah, the evaluate partnerships and programs throughout the district. We got, I know we just received Communities and Schools, and she gave us, we had a sheet of data, and I know Boys and Girls Club came, and we had data from them. I guess if we could just have that in one clump, because when we get it sporadically throughout the year, then I forget what was presented. What was presented. So if we could have that like in a end of the year booklet, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, it would just be a matter of copying what CIS gave
Or
us.
maybe just point us to those places in the board
Yeah,
docs, maybe,
yeah.
if it's there. I mean, I'd be more
Yeah.
than happy to go find it, but.
And I also asked for national norms, which you did include, so that you could kind of have, we could compare ourselves to what was actually happening out there. I don't know, those were mine.
Well, some of the things, that- and I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, is I guess some of the measurements I would like to have, like a goal. Well, I know these are all goals, but I mean, our goal is to, well, for example, I thought this was interesting, you know, gains in the number of AP scores at 3 or above. Well, there was a gain because we had 95 students. 95 students. But our percentage was a decrease. So what are we, you know, we're opening the opportunity for more students to be involved in AP. That's a whole lot different than, you know, so how you look at that metric as a measurement, I don't know that I call that a gain. You know, now, if that was written, the number of opportunities for students to take the AP test to be increased, then
That's a gain.
that's a gain.
Right.
But if we're looking at a percentage for an evaluation of our instruction in the high school, then that, not as a single indicator, you know, we dropped about 30%. So,
I had some on, flipping back to what we talked about earlier was like the CPI training. I wonder how many teachers are involved in that, or do we have enough involved in that? That's just one example. Then,
And not just teachers.
no, yeah, just
Staff.
staff. And then, getting back to like the evaluate partnerships and programs throughout the district, you got a lot of just partnerships there, but maybe in detail on that instead of just listing them, like, how many kids are involved with the Boys and Girls Club, how many kids does it affect, approximately what's our partnership with Warrenly, how many kids are affected there, Gleaners, maybe a possibility of a number, how many kids take part in the food bank or families, the Richmond Area Career Center.
A lot of,
We've had that information
I understand that, but
sporadically. That's what I'm saying.
But it
It's
needs to be
not compiled.
consolidated, absolutely. And like I do know a lot about the Career Center, and there's, all those programs have different partnerships. All of them have different partnerships. And let's talk about the different companies that are in, working with us and co-oping kids out and things like that. Also, on the relationship goal, you have to strengthen internal and external relationships and build trust and future planning. You've got a lot of things listed here, and it's an impressive list. Almost every one of those is an external relationship. I want to see, you know, some more things, how we're doing to relationships with staff, not just teachers, not just REA, but all staff. Are we doing anything?
let me jump in 1 second. So the metric underneath that, though, is track the number of meetings with city, county, state, and business. So it wasn't,
Okay.
it wasn't laid out for
Okay.
that, so that would be a different metric.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't part of building that metric.
Correct.
Okay, but that's kind of where I want to go with it, just to see. And part of that is with the professional developments and things like that. And you know, we have I stated before that we've had a lot of turnover in staff, and I know it's a statewide epidemic, and we are not exclusive to that. It's what are we doing that's above and beyond to possibly retain teachers and staff and try to reduce that turnover rate.
Well, and I think we should also make sure you keep this someplace handy, because when we set new board goals, we need to look at this again and
Absolutely.
see where the weak areas are, and where we feel like that we need to have a goal for improvement.
I mean, it's a great list of documentation you've got here, and it's very impressive. It's just, there's a couple things I'd like to see a little bit more in depth.
well, it's almost too much. I mean,
Don't mind. I don't even know how to answer that.
Don't even say, I can't believe you said that out loud.
After what we heard earlier.
I think Todd just had a heart attack.
well, you know, what I meant is
To process it quickly,
to
Right.
process it yeah. I mean, as I look at the different scores, I mean,
but it's fantastic, though. I mean, it is a really great review
Yes.
of all that is and that has happened. Now, if we need a little more numerical information, most of it exists. It's nothing that hasn't been done, so we just need to go find it. And I guess if you can point us, so we can be reminded what the data was from.
well, I think if we spend more time this next school year talking about student performance, I don't feel like we spent enough time talking about it last year. Maybe I just wasn't smart enough to pick up on it when the topic came, but.
Well, I think we have talked about student performance, but then you know, there's been years before we said we didn't talk enough about policy. That's all we've done this year is policy. So it's hard to sometimes balance all of it. But we do, I mean, I agree with you, Jeff, that we do need to spend some more time on student performance. And especially at the intermediate levels.
I would not just say performance, I would say students in general. I mean, the bulk of this, and while, yes, it ties, is, I mean, students are more than just the test scores. And I think we need to spend more time on students in general at the board level.
I think the key with that is when.
Yeah, because, you know, like I said,
I think the key to that is when.
Right,
We're already having 2, 3, 4-hour meetings.
right.
When are you gonna spend more time? And I'm not saying that, I'm just asking.
And maybe we need to be a little more deliberate when we have topics that are,
What are you doing every Wednesday night? No,
that's right. Well, when we have topics.
On the off Wednesday nights, I have discussion.
Right.
That typically is going over 2 hours as well, so.
But I mean, when we have conversations about, for example, power up professional development, okay. Granted, that's not a direct tie, but you could make it directly tied to student performance pretty quickly, I think, because now you're putting the best trained teachers in the classroom in front of the students. So that's what I'm saying, is let's just make sure that we, while I don't disagree with you, I'm just saying whatever topic we're on, we just need to be very deliberate about how does this affect our students and make sure that we get back to that conversation. And I think we do pretty well, but I don't think we can do too much, so.
well, and the other thing too, I mean, in looking at years past, when we didn't have technology and we had to keep all this stuff in large notebooks, it was difficult.
Similar to Brad's.
He just did it. It was difficult. I mean, it was difficult to keep track. And it's like you said, it's almost overload of information sometimes, but we've
Well, I
asked
mean, we
for
tried
it.
to do the data on the USB stick, and that kind
It was
of,
tough.
that's flopped. Maybe we just need to create a spot in Canvas that
Canvas.
all
Well,
this
I-
data is housed, so
Canvas. Good.
performances that we can.
Because that's what I was gonna say, is,
Lucky
you
Nathan.
said something about us,
I didn't even have to say it.
which, Rob, you'll probably get stuck with.
I have never logged on yet.
Oh, we can do that.
Hey, so just for the record, you have
With
just given
training us in Canvas, but if we could get
and
all
the
this
assistant
stuff
superintendent
in
both
one
heart attacks
spot,
tonight.
that would be great. And I was telling, I did tell Superintendent Terrell that I had looked at a website I was looking for advertising policies. And I was looking at other school systems, and this one school system had their policies, administrative guidelines, Indiana state statutes, and something else, and it was all right there together where you could, you know,
Awesome.
we've talked about that before.
So there's a new standard.
There you go.
Web guy.
That's like a whole project.
Keep our
But it was,
website updated.
it was so I thought, oh, this would be so handy to have this so that you're not looking, it was all right there. You could just punch and click. Rob.
Wow.
Yeah. That's all you have to say is yeah.
You could share, if you could share the example, we could take a look at it. so
Okay.
Be good.
I will.
Good answer.
Yeah, it was.
Now I have to find it. But anyway, I mean, it was good. It was interesting. I thought it would be helpful.
Well, and even, I mean, we're kind of chuckling about it a little bit, but I mean, even the data on the finances. You know, even we get the communication in the board updates has more information in it that's critical, but unfortunately, it doesn't come to us in the same formats before, so it's harder to compile all that data in the same place. So when I was trying to go back and look at the rainy day fund and some of the it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that was in the board update, now I gotta go back to here.
But Canvas would be a really good
Yeah,
solution to that
so
too, because then you could link,
it's
well,
kinda-
because if your board update could be, like if you say in the board update, you, hey, reference XYZ, and there's a link, and it would be linked, so, yeah, I could see that helping.
You could.
Makes sense.
Okay. Anything else? Keep those handy, because we're gonna use them again. Okay. Are we up to public commentary? There's no one left in the audience, so I guess
There's 3 of them back there. They fell asleep and they're on the ground.
our invisible friends. Okay, so we're ready for preview upcoming meetings and minutes.
Yeah, so one that we need to talk about, the 13th of September is our homecoming parade, and so we need to look at moving that board meeting up and limiting the length of that. Ask that we move it to 4, but open that up for further discussion from all of you.
So we would have to be
Well,
pushed by.
I just realized something, didn't we just pass the open, help me with the
Public
terminology.
hearing, it's
Public
been
hearing,
posted for 5:30, so we'll have to amend the budget action if we change the time.
Or we can have the hearing at the end of it.
If it's 5:30, yeah, we could do that.
If it's 5:30.
I didn't hear, have the.
If we, or we can have that hearing at the very end of our meeting.
What time does
So
parade
if we
start,
make
6?
that, yeah. Typically, the hearing isn't gonna, I mean, there's,
You,
Well, I would
I hate to
prefer
say nobody's gonna show up to
4:30
talk
myself,
about it, but most won't. I'm sorry?
I said I would
4:30.
prefer 4:30, making the board.
And we can do 4:30,
bit cheaper.
and just make sure that we keep it at an hour, and if we have the hearing set at 5:30, that would make us
Keep
end
on
it on
task.
time. And I'd be fine with that.
But if you
Let's
guys
go
would
with
like to
that.
spend an extra half an hour with me, I'll make sure I can make it work.
Let's go with that, 4:30.
4:30, and then we'll start the hearing at 5:30.
6 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
Everybody chose 4:30, Jeff.
What does that say?
I don't know.
You open that door.
Sometimes I can read the sign on the walls and sometimes I can't.
Okay. All right, so 4:30 is
Don't
the
need to
next
be
board
subtle,
meeting.
right?
That's the 13th, right?
Yes.
Do we have anything else in that as far as
Nope.
preview? Okay. Press conference, do you have any questions?
Vocal noise? Oh, maybe
You're
vocal noise.
awake.
Rebecca Levere, WFMG, WKBV, and I don't exactly have a question, but I need to take a moment of Mr. Terrell's time tonight and get some general statements for use on air tomorrow.
Can we work it out, like, for me to give you a phone call afterwards, simply because we have a big executive session right away?
We can talk about it after the meeting if that'll work better.
If you can get with Bridget. And,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Bell ringer.
Our bell ringer this evening, just want to celebrate all of our teachers and coaches who provide the extended day opportunities for our students. It is amazing how quickly we get back into that, and every night of the week and weekend is full. So we appreciate all the extra time that our teachers and coaches give to our kids.
All right, with that said, meeting's adjourned.